All right, a quick update on the Dillian Whyte WBC situation. Mauricio Sulaiman has talked about the reasons why Dominic Breazeale ended up as mandatory challenger and given his breakdown. Basically, Mauricio Sulaiman, and I'll leave a link in the description to this interview where Mauricio Sulaiman explains all this stuff. Mauricio Sulaiman basically says that he was legally obligated to make or to give Dominic Breazeale a final elimination bout. He was legally obligated because Dominic Breazeale was initially supposed to take part in a final eliminator against Bermane. Some of you guys may remember that. That fight fell out, and I think maybe one or two other fights fell out, and Breazeale managed to obtain a written agreement from the WBC that his next fight would be a final eliminator for the WBC heavyweight title. And so Mauricio Sulaiman says that when Breazeale fought Molina, it was both a final eliminator and a standard eliminator. It was a final eliminator for Breazeale, but it wasn't a final eliminator for Molina. So if Breazeale won, he'd become mandatory. But if Molina won, he would not become mandatory. Now, that explanation to me is a plausible explanation. Yeah, I can see that could well be the case, and that could well explain how Breazeale ended up fighting in a final eliminator. But it still doesn't explain why Molina was fighting in a final eliminator. Molina, how the hell did he manage to get in a final eliminator before Dillian Whyte, a guy who was ranked above Molina and Breazeale? Why wasn't Dillian Whyte in a final eliminator against Dominic Breazeale? Why wasn't that ordered by the WBC? Yes, Dillian Whyte tried to fight Breazeale on the Joshua Takam undercard, but that's not a fight the WBC had ordered. So people saying, oh, Whyte didn't offer him enough money. Maybe he didn't. But if the WBC had ordered it as a final eliminator, then it may have been taken off the Joshua Takam undercard altogether, because it may have gone into prolonged negotiations, and then when you can't settle on a particular deal, it goes to a purse bid. So I can't see any reason at all why the WBC wouldn't have ordered Dillian Whyte versus Dominic Breazeale as a final eliminator for the WBC heavyweight title, to become mandatory. Why didn't they do that? And on top of all that, according to Eddie Hearn, this situation with Breazeale and Molina, where it was a final eliminator for Breazeale, but it wasn't a final eliminator for Molina, according to Hearn, and he might not be telling the truth, I'm not sure, but according to him, he wasn't made aware of this. He wasn't made aware that Breazeale would be mandatory if he beat Molina. He just asked, is this a final eliminator? And he says the WBC said no. According to him, they didn't explain that it was a final eliminator for Breazeale, but it wasn't a final eliminator for Molina. Perhaps they didn't explain the legal situation. Mauricio Sulaiman said that all of this information has been available on the WBC website, and that journalists have not been doing their job in terms of reading the WBC website. It says he updates it every 3 months. So he says that information has been on there for a long time. I have looked at the WBC website and I can't recall seeing the information there. Maybe it passed me by. I'm going to be looking at the WBC website much more closely, in the coming months and what have you, to see if there's any kind of consistency in their rankings and stuff like that. So we'll see. I mean, the WBC have done all kinds of dubious things over the years, not just in the heavyweight division, at lower weights with, various different fighters, Canelo, Stevenson, many different fighters. There are dubious situations involving the WBC. So they're hardly the most credible organization. And this situation right here with, Breazeale, Whyte, and Molina is another example of how they lack credibility. I mean, furthermore, you want to talk about the mandatory situation. How on earth did Bermane get made WBC mandatory for Deontay Wilder when he hadn't fought in he'd had one fight in 3 years against Derek Rossi, a journeyman, and they made him mandatory for Wilder again, the WBC. How the hell does that work? How does that work? And then they put Molina, another Don King fighter, because remember, Staverne's a Don King fighter. Maybe this is what it's all about. Maybe it's Mauricio Sulaiman's relationships with Don King and Al Heyman. Maybe they're just he's very close with Heyman and Don King. I mean, he's been close with Don King for, decades. Well, his dad, Jose Sulaiman, more so than Mauricio, but still, maybe that's what it's all about. Because you got Staverne inexplicably getting made mandatory for Wilder when he's had one fight in 3 years and it was against the journeyman. And then you got another Don King guy, Molina, managing to get an eliminator against Breazeale. Why wasn't Whyte getting ordered to fight Breazeale? It makes no sense at all. Makes no sense at all. Whyte and Breazeale should have been the final eliminator as far as I'm concerned. And then the winner of that becomes mandatory to face Deontay Wilder. That's how it should have been. So, yeah, just a quick update on that. Let me know how you guys feel about it in the comments. I'm out.